expertise in teaching and coaching educators to be effectively culturally responsive and warm demander educators was demonstrated while she was a coordinator with Denver Math Fellows. During her second year, 2 of her schools demonstrated the highest significant growth for students in all schools that participated in Denver Math Fellows. Dr. Ware's most recent creation is Radical Self-Care, a training that supports educators in understanding and implementing radical self-care strategies. Educators who have intentionally implemented radical self-care excitedly report that in addition to growth in their physical, emotional, and brain health, their relationships with students improved. Most importantly, participants in radical self-care training also report that they are better equipped to challenge issues of equity after implementing radical self-care into their lives. So team, it is a great honor and gratitude that I get to say, welcome Dr. Ware, and thank you for joining our team as our keynote speaker this morning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ware.
Good morning. Thank you for that really warm welcome. That feels so good. So much nice oxytocin to get started. So take a deep breath with me. I want to thank you for inviting me, Dr. Sawyer. I'm honored to be a part of your work with your school, and I'm honored to be a part of the work that Ms. Giza and Gwen Victor are doing at your school and all of the team, because this can't be done by one person. I want to start with encouraging you and acknowledging the challenging work that you're doing with the equity experience and culturally responsive teaching training, and encourage you to continue. This work is the foundation to engaging all students in an equitable education experience. And I'm starting my talk with you today with a quote from James Frazier in Jacqueline Jordan Irvine's edited volume titled In Search of Wholeness. He wrote, "So what is a healthy, whole urban teacher? One who knows him or herself," and I'm going to add their selves too. "One who's taken the time, energy, discipline to examine her, himself, their selves, especially in relationship to their own race and racial identity, and in relationship to the race and racial identity of their students. In other words, a healthy and whole teacher is a culturally responsive teacher." As a student of Jacqueline Jordan Irvine and an author in this book that I showed you, and later Warm Demanders, I recently had a Sankofa moment where I went back to this 2002 edited volume to ground or establish myself in my content for today. I encourage you to look up what Sankofa is so that you understand my work on a deeper level, this talk on a deeper level. I was inspired to write Radical Self-Care in 2016, 14 years after I was given the intellectual idea of healthy and whole teachers as a description of a noun, and now I know it is an action. My belief is that in order to do this work in any level of integrity, it is a daily action, and it must be done in order to peel back the layers of bias, in order to practice educational equity and disrupt systems of oppression in public education. We all must first be healthy and whole, which is why I call radical self-care. Irvine wrote, "Teachers cannot become fully functional persons and competent whole professionals if their cultural selves remain denied, hidden, or unexamined." I see culture as two contexts. Culture of the lived experiences as white teachers in America. Culture of public education that makes the lived experiences of white people as the standard by which BIPOC students are measured. The work you're doing in exploring those two overlapping cultures, I imagine, is hard to do. That's why you must do radical self-care. Radical self-care is the first step in doing this difficult and messy work. I don't know what it's like to peel back the layers and examine the layers of bias, that make the experience of white teachers. But I know what it's like to experience education that is a part of a racially oppressive system. I understand the experiences of your students and what it's like to be an educator and administrator in that oppressive system. Being able to see both landscapes of student and leader, I can tell you that radical self-care, in my bias, is the one important step in becoming a healthy, whole, culturally responsive educator. I can't imagine how you do this difficult work without intentionally ongoing and consistent care for self. That is radical self-care. That care is radical in public education because the system is set for us to give and give without time to pause, relax, recover, and restore. Equity work requires us to reflect, and yet, how can we reflect when we are not in a space of restoration? Something radical self-care identifies as vital to becoming healthy and whole. If you are not experiencing restoration, how can you be comfortable with being uncomfortable? How can you realize bias that is foundational to beliefs that give you status in American education and yet not have time to release those beliefs? I encourage you to reread my blog on radical self-care, review the video, and every day, take time for intentional action for your health and to engage in a practice of gratitude, which builds your resiliency. The resilience needed to be healthy and whole, culturally responsive teachers. As you become healthy and whole from radical self-care, your ability to respect the culture of your students will increase, and your mutual respect for students, they respect you, you respect them, will also increase. So, as a good keynote speaker, I think I need to leave you with some questions, and I've purposely allowed time for questions. So I leave you with these questions, and then I open it up for your questions. Are you willing to do the work? First, the work of radical self-care, which is completely personal, in order to do the work to become equitable educators. Are you willing to write 3 things you're grateful for and take 1 action to improve your physical and brain health daily? Are you willing to take 15 minutes to relax each day? Are you willing to do the work to become a healthy, whole, culturally responsive teacher? Because grounding yourself in that work exponentially improves your relationships with your colleagues, with your students, with your purpose of doing this work, because you have to be grounded in the purpose of this work, or how can you do it? So I leave you with this question, and I open it up to your questions for me. Are you willing? Thank you for inviting me today. It is quite an honor. It fills my bucket at the start of a very long, full, wonderful day. And so I open it up for questions, and if you take too much wait time, I'll call on people that I know. So I encourage you to step in.
Well, as my team thinks about questions, my teammates, I want to say thank you. I can imagine a more meaningful launch into our day. And I think as I took notes, there are very important lessons I need to learn from the expertise you shared.
Thank you.
So I will definitely mute and let my teammates ask questions.
Okay, so Ms. Gizon, what's on your mind? You know what's calling on you.
I felt it.
Good.
It's about to be me. My first thought is, in this virtual world, how do we support our students who are in front of the screen all day to get that self-care time?
How do we support students who get self-care time?
Because for them, I can say self-care. Like for advisory this morning, they're doing some self-care. And my options for self-care is turn the computer off. Go walk around the house, maybe go make your bed. I promise that'll make you feel better. Go eat some breakfast, take a nap, go read a book if you'd like, or even go watch your favorite TV show for a little bit. But I feel like those are like surface level self-care activities. And I'm wondering if there's a deeper level.
So here's the great thing about what I've learned in the review of literature I've done for radical self-care. What seems like minor surface level things really has the impact on improving your brain health, which in turn improves your physical health. Because rather than have willpower to drink more water, if you just drink more water, then your brain becomes healthier and it's like, you know what? We could do a little walking too. And so you don't have to make yourself do more things. Your brain heals and so you do more things. The other thing is always model. So I like to do a drinking game when I do trainings. And so I'll say, okay, we have a drinking game. And everybody likes that excitement because it's like, oh, sounds like shots, right? Well, it's like you're drinking water. And so I say, every time you see me drink water, you drink water. And then what I'll do is I'll notice people on the screen and I was like, oh, I noticed Alicia's drinking water. Okay, everybody, we got to drink some water. And so you model that for them. You also explain to them the science and the importance behind taking a 15-minute break. You explain that Zoom fatigue and Zoom headaches are real. And so that's why water is so important, because whenever you have a headache, usually it's dehydration. And that Zoom headache is right there. And it comes from looking around the screen and trying to read the emotions and everything. And so you unpack so instead of just saying you need to relax, you unpack why they need to relax. You unpack why they need to go stand in the sun if that's possible. You unpack the importance and that's the whole thing that amazes me the more I do research into the literature about radical self-care. It sounds like you need to do something big and radical, right? No, the radical thing is one small thing consistently. Writing things you're grateful for every day. And if you miss a day, you pick back up. It's not like, oh, you fell off your diet plan. It's like, okay, you pick back up. It's all about making your brain feel healthy, and your brain will then naturally, I'm telling you, naturally say, you know what, let's go for a walk tomorrow. We've got time. Oh, you know what, the sun's still kind of out. I got a little time. Let me go out and get a little walk. So instead of I've got to go for a walk, you'll naturally say, you know what, I feel like a walk. And so unpack that for your students, demonstrate that for your students, build that into your day for your students. And then if you really want to encourage it, same thing with your team, Dr. Sawyer, ask about it. Make it a part of the dialogue in your team meetings. How are you doing your gratitudes? This is what I'm grateful for today. Ask people to tell you how they're doing, because the other element I've learned in doing radical self-care trainings is when people start doing it, they want to tell you. They will say, I'm doing so-and-so now, because they're feeling a change and they don't quite know how to identify. They don't necessarily say, well, my brain's feeling healthy, so I want to tell. It's just like, hey, I feel better. And so it will occur naturally. So build the culture, demonstrate the culture, reinforce the culture by asking questions about what people are doing, and unpack why they're doing this self-care and explain. It sounds real simplistic, but 15 minutes just off this screen will improve just how you feel for the rest of the day. And again, tell them, wow, that 15-minute break we took, I stepped away, I made a quick little sandwich, got a little juice in, I feel so much better. And so you help them understand why they're doing it, instead of just saying do it, but there's no meaning behind why they're doing it. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for answering my question.
Yes. Anyone else?
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Sawyer, I saw your blue
I'm drinking water. So what are you doing? I'm drinking water right now.
I'm going to be the awkward person that does not have a drink in front of me.
It's okay. It's okay. I see everybody else drinking water. Good job.
They drank it for me. Sion's got me.
There we go.
So one of the things that you said about like how can we reflect and be comfortable in being uncomfortable without being in that restoration like mindset and like space.
Yes.
And that kind of pushed me to think about some of our equity experience meetings where we have small groups around our equity experience, and we're getting ready to, as we move through the year, get into some of those uncomfortable conversations where we are having to like acknowledge and unpack our own bias and our own harm. And our own privilege. And I guess I'm just curious, like the radical self-care isn't like we can encourage, we can, like you said, like put these out and model and push. But when we get into those spaces where we know for a fact teachers are going to be pushed to that space, is there anything that we should be doing prior to that meeting to help them understand the importance of that radical self-care in the work itself before the meeting to really push for that? And maybe then, like you said, like ask and start the meeting off, what radical self-care did you do this morning or over the weekend to get ready for today or something?
So that's exactly it. Don't wait until that meeting to say, okay, everybody do some self-care. It's going to get scary. You've set the culture where they're doing it anyway. And then when you come to that, one of the things that the equity experience, every module has a space in there where it identifies this is hard work, take your time to breathe, figure out your self-care strategy, plan to go for a walk. Like if you're in the module and it gets to be a little too intense, get up, go for a walk, come back and complete it. And so again, you don't wait till that moment, you set the culture so that moment, when that moment comes, they're ready. Here's a prime example. When I first started doing radical self-care, I kind of hoped that it would impact equity. I had to, I'm a qualitative researcher, so I had to wait to get the feedback from participants to know that that was happening. One of the first comments I got was from a person who's taken radical self-care 9 times, and she says she gets something out of it every time. Because I finally was like, hey, aren't you done with this? And she says she gets something out of it every time. And she's made remarkable changes to her health. And that's a different story, but yes. And so the first thing she said was it was easier for her to have difficult conversations with her colleagues about students. And she works in special ed. And so there's lots of equity issues around students in special ed. And so she said doing radical self-care and improving her health made those conversations easier. The other piece of data that I got just in August, there's a school that I'm doing some work with. We started in January. One of the first conversations, the assistant principal really approached me with doing the work. And I really tried very hard not to make the commitment to the work. And I kept putting all these conditions up. Well, you need to do this and you need to do that. And they did them all. So I was like, okay, I guess I got to do the work. So one of the first meetings, the principal said she wasn't sure that she had privilege. And I literally thought, oh my goodness, what have I walked into? How do I get this woman to unpack her privilege while I'm doing this sequence of work from radical self-care, unpacking bias to warm demander training? And then I saw some growth points every time we met. And I was like, okay, progress. But then this August, she said, and she's given me permission to use this quote. She's even given me permission to use her name. I choose not to. She said that after noticing everything going on in the world this summer with the global pandemic of agreement that racial inequity in America was out of control, with the number of Black people who were being killed with no recourse to police who were killing them. Take a deep breath if that was all hard for you to hear, because it's hard for me to live it. She said she realized then that even though she had been doing radical self-care, like she did Orange Theory and stuff, so she was doing work, don't get me wrong. She dug in and really improved her health, even changed some of her relationships. And her comment to me was, after seeing all that, she knew she had to do radical self-care because she didn't want to lead her school through a lens of bias. So I've got lots of data now from people who say in doing radical self-care intentionally and consistently, and that's the thing, you don't have to do big strides, but you have to be consistent. You don't have to go on a big old diet and change your whole life, and you don't have to do all that, but you have to be consistent. And And so we have the understanding now that being in a healthy, whole space helps you do the equity work. And I think about all those years I was trying to teach teachers how to be warm demander teachers, but I missed the first two steps. And it wasn't until I was inspired to write Radical Self-Care that I understood, oh, wait a minute. The reason they're not getting this is not that I can't explain it well, is we're missing the first two steps. And the first step is radical self-care. And the second step is intentionally unpacking biases. And the overlapping circle in that is unpacking biases as it relates to the relationship you have with students. Take a deep breath on that, because you're not just unpacking your biases for yourself, but you're also looking at, so how have my biases impacted my relationships with my students? Because relationships are critical to cultural responsive teaching. And authentic relationships and engaging relationships and relationships that respect students bringing their whole cultural selves. Now, that doesn't mean they get to say inappropriate things in class, because that's not class culture. But they don't have to not be so Black. You know, we have that anti-Blackness sentiment that happens in America. And so we are expected to assimilate and to learn the norms of white culture so that we can be seen as successful. And I'm saying, unpack your bias so your students who don't bring those behaviors to class can be fully engaged, and you can see their genius, and they can be co-facilitators with you in the teaching of the work. You see their genius, your students see their genius, and that's the environment where everyone grows. So see, that's a lot of stuff to unpack. So you've got to be well-versed. You've got to be ready to hear a student say, hey, that's racist. And you not take it as a personal thing. You're able to say, you know what? I was operating in a system of white supremacy culture right there. Let's unpack that. So we know in doing equity work, frequently people's response is, oh, you're saying that to me personally. You're offending me. You're saying I'm racist. We're saying the system is racist. And we've got to unpack this system and see our part in it. Gwen will tell you, as a school leader, we haven't talked in a while, but we have been parts of systems that we couldn't always bump against and stop because it was a system of oppression. And so I have to own for myself, I was a part of that system. I am a part of that system. Fortunately, I'm not in a school now, so I'm not worrying about, I can't suspend this child, which was always a concern for me, to how do I support schools, teams, leaders into seeing this work so they in turn can make sure we're not suspending students, for that example. So that was a lot of information. Hope I didn't overwhelm you. But yes, that's that point. Looking at the time, we have about 8 more minutes for my scheduled time with you. You're welcome to have that 8 minutes in terms of a question or however I can support you. And I'm drinking water now, so.
Well, I have a question, but I'm going to wait so my teammates can have some space. So I'm going to mute and see if anybody would like to jump in with a question before I ask.
I just wanted to say, well, Dr. Ware, I love you and I miss Steve.
I love you. Hey, beautiful, what are you doing?
I've mentioned, I think, warm demander a few times, and maybe, I don't know, in the past at some point at Hamilton, I might have done a presentation on warm demander, but I happened to mention it in some meeting I was in with teachers, I think a week or so ago, and them said, well, what is a warm demander? And so I think we need you to come to Hamilton and help me.
Gwen, don't be taking advantage of our friendship.
Help me with helping our teachers become warm demanders, because it's really important. And so that's what I want. I didn't really have a question, but this work is hard. It's extremely important. it can be extremely exhausting. And, you know, being Black and doing this work, you know, we sometimes get so exhausted and so frustrated. We want to throw our hands in the air and give up. But we don't do that, of course, right? Because, you know, it's too important. And so I know one of the things we do is, you know, me and some of the other, you know, Black members of the staff, we get together and we just, you know, have a space where we can share kind of how we're feeling and what we're hearing and things like that, you know, and it kind of keeps us grounded, you know, and we kind of support each other so that we can continue to do this work. What is something else? Because I know you have a ton of ideas that we can do. And I'm not great at self-care, but I'm doing so much better. And one of the things I do, I have this prayer and praises book now, and I'm talking too much, so I'll shut up so you have a couple of minutes to answer. But so every day I write in this book, you know, a praise or something that I'm grateful or thankful for. And then a prayer, something that I'm praying about, something that's on my mind that might be heavy, you know, that I, you know, just need support with. And so I think that helps me. But what are something else that you think we can do? And I'm speaking specifically about being Black and doing this work.
And I understand about being Black and doing this work. You know, we've shared some times talking about that. So let me start with the last thing you said about the book where you have prayer and praise. Continue to do that. And the other thing I encourage you to do is when you have, and I encourage all of you to do this, when you have that amazing experience that you don't want to forget, write it in detail. And what happens with your brain, I'm like such a brain nerd right now. What happens with your brain is when you go back and read that, your brain relives it and it gets that oxytocin again. And it's like, oh, life is good. Look at these amazing experiences, because your brain literally gets re-stimulated and it doesn't know that I'm just reading it again. It thinks you're having that experience again. And it's like, you know, life's kind of good. We keep having these good experiences. So keep doing that. Again, add one thing. It might be the water. It might be the, I'm going to get up and walk, you know, 10 minutes, 3 times a day, like whatever you do. The other thing, Gwen, you know, I cannot deny you. So let's put something on the calendar. Let me start with doing some support for the African-American women of color educators. And then let's plan something on Warm Demander. And as your pre-work, you have to be, you know, to do radicals, to do Warm Demander. Again, I told you before, there's some steps before that. You have to be consistent with your radical self-care because you got to be well to do this work. Second, you've got to continue to do your unpacking of biases. And so I encourage all of you over the Christmas break to read a book and like take a deep breath when it rattles you and like do the work. And then let's get something on the calendar in January where I can do, and you know, I'm not going to do an hour. So please don't ask me to come do Warm Demander in an hour because that cheapens my work. So give me some time and I will come and do some work with you for Warm Demander, probably to either give some pre-work or some post-work. I'll replicate it out of the work that I'm doing with CLA because they've had me now for, this is going into the 3rd year. And so our continuum is going from radical self-care to unpacking biases to moving into Warm Demander work. Let me let you know, Warm Demand, you know, people hear Warm Demander, it's like, oh, that's so cute. I want to be that. Warm Demanders work because I talk about things in Warm Demander that aren't all fuzzy and warm. And so that's been the misconception. And that's why I'm doing scholarship on it now, because people thought, oh, warm, demanding, I can do that. And it's like, no. Before you even get to the warm that's effective with students who look like me, it requires that you unpack a whole lot of stuff. So you've asked for this training. Be ready for some, be ready for a little eyebrow singeing. But I'm happy to do the work only because you asked, Gwen, and you know how I love you. Anything else? We have one more minute. Dr. Sawyer, of course, Gwen, of course. We have one more minute, Dr. Sawyer. I want to give you that. I have like one more minute. I can stay another minute if you need to ask a question and allow you to have the last comment or question.
Well, I really, at this point, I want to bounce off of your words about gratitude and say a huge gratitude to you. I truly cannot imagine a more meaningful start to our day that we have such aspirations for.
To an even deeper level, to do this work, understanding you've got to be well first. So get well, get healthy, get real healthy and whole before I come to Warm Demander. Like, do it, start now, getting prepared, because I'm gonna do something special just for y'all. So.
That is really exciting. And thank you, Ms. Victor.
Well, I will be in touch.
Yes, get in touch with me and you know what? We need to do a conference call. We need to do a call over the break anyway. So look at your schedule. Let's do a time. I've got a Zoom link. Let's see each other and talk, and let's schedule some time with your school.
Okay.
All right, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a beautiful day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Ware. Well, that was a keynote speech that I think will shape a lot of our thinking